This is my second take on this video, and the reason I'm only pointing that out is because first time I was so angry. I had so much emotion going on. It felt almost insincere. It didn't feel like me. It felt like I was letting my emotions take too much control. So I want to try this again and take my time a little bit more and maybe be a little less insufferable while still being, of course, passionate about this topic. I actually was originally going to make a video talking about the Dredge, the newest leaked killer, and my problems with his power, because I absolutely despise of his power, and I think that they represent everything that's wrong with like modern day DBD killer design, and that's something I might still talk about. But some news came out early this morning, as you can probably guess, about the Blight, that really upset me, that really got under my skin to where, to me, this is even more important than the Dredge. And it's very important to me to talk about this, to give my thoughts on this, because I'm very passionate about this. To set the scene, the Blight as it stands right now is my favorite character in this game by a mile. He is the most fun I've ever had with a character in Dead by Daylight, or in any game for that matter. He truly is the most fun I've ever had with a character in any video game in my entire life. I love the Blight so damn much. He means so much to me. And that's why this news regarding him means so much to me. But before we go into that, I want to start talking about a little bit of the history of the Blight first. So let's start with the very beginning of Blight, which would be the PTB, the public test build, where we saw him for the first time and we tested out his power. In the PTB, everyone hated this character, certainly including me. And people hated him because, one, his collision box was terrible.
I don't move, bird.
Fuck! 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 I can't even get around that!
He couldn't fit through anything. He could hardly fit through any doorways, because his collision box was so big. And for a character that runs around and dashes through things, him being so fat that he couldn't fit through anything, it was detrimental to his power. The other thing about the character, though, that made people hate him was that he was perceived in general as being extremely weak. And the reason he was perceived as being extremely weak is because people were playing him as he was intended to be played.
Ah!
Where are you going?
Motherfucker! I hate this killer! It's so not fun!
And what I mean by this is that people were playing him merely as a bouncing killer. They were slamming into things and then bouncing off to other things. And they were playing him like a walking pinball, because that's how he was intended. That's how he was described. That's how his power was described. And that's really all people thought you were supposed to do with him, was bounce off of things. And people quickly realized that this idea, that this mechanic of a killer that bounces off of things, was useless in most settings. His mobility was cool. He could run around the map like crazy. But in terms of actually chasing survivors, in terms of actually his chasing ability at tiles, at like anything actually strong, any kind of strong tile, his power was useless. You could do almost nothing. Like at the killer shack, you could do nothing. At TL walls, you could do nothing. And so I hated him, not only because he was weak, but I also hated how uninspired he felt. I looked at the Blight, and I was like, my god, another run fast killer. And I was like, they really have run out of ideas here, haven't they? They were like, okay, let's pick another run fast killer, but this one is supposed to run into things. I was truly floored by how uncreative he felt. And so, during the PTB and during his early release days, I hated him and most of the player base hated him, and most people didn't play him. However, things quickly changed because people started to discover very important things about this character. More specifically, people discovered tricks with him. They discovered bugs in his power that made him so much more interesting and so much stronger. Things were discovered like J-flicking, like moon rushing, like hug-teching, like Z-flicking. All these bugs, which they were bugs, and the ones that still exist are by definition bugs, because they're not the way the character was intended to be, but these things about him, these bugs, made him so much stronger and so much more interesting to play, and so much more interesting to play against and watch be played. It truly made this character have such an incredibly high skill cap that was missing before. Yes, he was an incredibly difficult character, but at the same time, there was no reward for it. Now, with these new tricks and his newfound strength, he had a high skill cap that felt rewarding, and that made him so much more satisfying to play as. And quickly, both sides, both killers and survivors, fell in love with him because he was extremely fun for the killer to play as, and survivors felt that the Blight was fair because his bugs, his new strategies, while they were strong, while they did make the character very strong, they always had counterplay. No matter how many tricks his player base found, no matter how many new tricks people created with him, there was always counterplay. And that made him feel fun and fair to play against, because if a survivor could predict what the Blight was going to do, they could outplay him. And if the Blight predicted what the survivor was going to do, he could outplay them. There was always the capacity for the other side to outplay the other. And for the one side to outplay the other. And so both sides loved him. Now, when I discovered that these new tricks with the Blight, it inspired me to try him out and to give him another chance with these tricks in mind. And that's when I fell in love with this character. Once I started using the tricks that the Blight had, and once I started understanding how high of a skill cap this character truly had, and how rewarding it was going to be to work toward that skill cap, then I started playing him non-stop. I was addicted to this character because he was so unique, he was so much fun, and he was so rewarding, and I had truly never felt anything like this in Dead by Daylight before. I never felt like there was such a complex character that felt worth my time. That was the big thing, was that for me, the Blight felt genuinely worth my time. And that's what made him the most fun character for me in any video game ever. I genuinely cannot overstate how much fun this character is to me. And as it stands right now, he still is the most fun character ever to me. Now, of all these bugs, of all these techs that Blight learned, or that Blight was discovered to have, I think that Hug Tech is probably his most important trick. It's certainly one of his most important tricks. Now, I'm kind of going at this video with the assumption that you know what Hug Tech is, but if you don't, what it is when Blight starts rushing, if Blight rushes and then walks up to an object, or to an obstacle where he's touching it, and then he activates the rush, instead of slamming into the object, he will slide off of it. And this allows him to rush sideways, and it allows him to rush around objects, rather than having to bounce to different things around the object. And so this made him capable of incredible plays, and it made him able to play at tiles he couldn't. It made him able to play at TL walls. It meant he could play at the Killer Shack. He had plays that he could make, and it was awesome. And so this is why the news that came out really early this morning is absolutely devastating. And that's what prompted this whole video. So, really early this morning, Mandy Talk made a post on the DBD forums. And this is what they put. To stop the argument that is brewing here. So this was a response to, I guess, a thread on the forums where people were arguing whether Hug Tech was intended or not. To stop the argument that is brewing here, Hug Tech is not intended and is classed as a bug and will be fixed. Now this isn't the first time that the Blight has been given this treatment. Back in the day, they also released a patch where they fixed Blight's J-Flick trick. Now, thankfully, but Blight's player base, because Blight's player base is so invested in the character, is so committed to the character, they found a way to basically keep J-Flicking in the game despite this bug fix. So, you know, God bless them for that. God bless their commitment to this character and their ability to discover a way to keep J-flicking despite the trick. So basically, that change did not mean a whole lot because the player base found a way around it. But the more important point here is that they have done this before. They have looked at the Blight's tricks that the community has discovered and have fixed them, despite the fact that the community has grown to love these things about the Blight. Now, what I've always said about the Blight, at least since I fell in love with the Blight, since I grew an appreciation for the Blight, what I've always said about him is that he is an accidental masterpiece. What I mean is, if the Blight worked as intended, and if the Blight was played as intended, he would be useless. Not only would he be weak, he would be uninspired, he would be uninteresting to play as and play against, he would be uninteresting to watch, he would be everything that he was in the test server, because in the test server, he was being played as intended, and during his early days, he was being played as intended, and guess what? Nobody played him, because when he was working as intended, nobody liked him. The reason people started to love the Blight was because players accidentally figured out ways to make the character interesting that behavior did not intend for. And so what this kind of creates a bigger conversation about bugs in video games. And I definitely think throughout the history of particularly online gaming, there has been the presence of bugs in video games that the communities of those games absolutely love. And as a result, those bugs stay in the game because the player base loves them. It makes the game better in some way. And unfortunately, behavior refuses to see it that way. And what that's going to do is it's going to butcher this character. Behavior does not want to let the Blight exist in a way that goes beyond their vision. And maybe this is them being super egotistical, maybe this is them being petty. Who knows what their motivation is? Either way, it's extremely unadmirable. Either way, it's extremely pathetic. But for some reason or another, behavior does not want the character to evolve beyond their vision, despite the fact that their vision was terrible. Again, I truly believe that this character was designed with no heart put into him at all. I believe that he was designed last minute, and that's why he was so buggy in the PTB. I think he was designed last minute. I think they were out of ideas. They didn't know what to do with him. So they were like, okay, fuck it. Just make him another run fast killer, and I don't know, how can we change it up? This time he bounces off of things? Okay, sure, I'll go with that. And it's like, I don't think that they had any care put into this character, or at least the bare minimum care was put into this character. And that's why he was so bizarre to everybody. Everybody was like, what is this character? Everybody was so confused by him, and they had every right to be, because he made no sense. He was so outlandish and so unexpected and so unsatisfying. But again, the player base found a way to make this character incredible for both sides. And what I really think about the Blight, and I definitely think there's at least a decent amount of people that agree with me on this. I think that the Blight is the healthiest character in Dead by Daylight, and as he stands right now, I think it's very possible that he'll be the healthiest character in the history of Dead by Daylight. I don't think there will be a character as healthy as him anytime in the future. I truly don't. Because it's so rare in Dead by Daylight, unfortunately, for there to be a character like the Blight that both sides love so much. And behavior is saying, we do not want the Blight to be in this healthy position, because that's not how he was intended to be. The character has evolved beyond behavior's vision, and he has become a better character for it. And that's the reason that I love him so much. It's the reason that so many love him so much. Am I repeating myself a lot? Yes, 100% I'm repeating myself. But again, I need to hammer this home. I really do. That The reason that this character is so good, the reason that this character is so beautifully designed, is because his player base made him. Behavior did not make this character. His community made him. His players made him. His players discovered the character in a way that Behavior never did. And Behavior doesn't like it. Behavior will not let it stand. They will not stand to let this character be good. And there's some serious repercussions from this. Survivors are going to have way less fun going. Not only is Blight going to be way less fun to play as, because he's going to be lacking these interesting mechanics, he's also going to be way less fun to play against, because right now, whenever Blight is at a tile with a survivor, he has multiple options as to how he wants to play the tile, because he has so many different mechanics he can use. But as they take away these mechanics, now Blight is just going to have to learn bounce paths at these tiles, and in a lot of cases, his bounce pathing is not even going to be useful. It's actually going to be a detriment to him. But in the rare instances where his bouncing, just his raw bouncing ability, actually is good at a tile, the survivor is not going to have any kind of interesting plays to make, because the survivor is going to know exactly what the Blight is going to do, because the Blight player is only going to have one option. They're only going to have one viable play that they can make, and so the survivor just needs to know that, and then they'll counter it. And so the survivor has way less interesting gameplay on their end as well. In terms of the meta of this game, the reason that Nurse is not the single best character in the game, she is the best, still, obviously, but the reason that the Nurse actually has Blight as competition for the best character in the game is because of these bugs, and when you take away these bugs, Nurse is going to reign supreme again. At high MMR, you're going to have even less killer variety. Even less. Right now, you basically have 2, maybe 3 killers that are actually optimal at high MMR. Now, it's going to be 1, maybe 2, but I'm just going to say just Nurse. You take away these bugs from Blight, only Nurse is viable at high MMR. Actually viable at high MMR. And so, of all the things that Behavior could be doing right now, they're not only butchering one of the few viable killers in this game, they are also butchering one of the most fun and the most healthy character in this game. It is disgusting. I don't know how else to put it. It's disgusting that this development team is destroying what this community created. Again, this community created this character, and they will not stand for it. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see this character, who is so brilliant to play as, be butchered down into whatever mess he was in the PTB. He is basically de-evolving back to the pathetic mess that he was in the PTB. And this news that they're getting rid of Hug Tech is the first step in that. This Behavior's ego getting in the way. And it's a damn shame.